as a reminder, we are again using our trig functions, our Pythagorean theorem, our inverse trig functions. And so that, as a reminder, means what we got to remember: SOHCAHTOA, so, which means that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. CA, which means that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And TOA, which means that tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we have that sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is our opposite over adjacent. And remember, secant, cosecant, and cotangent are all reciprocals of them, which means take them and flip them upside down. So the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. The reciprocal of cosine is secant. And which means 1 over whatever you had, or flip it upside down. And the reciprocal of sine is cosine. Cosecant, excuse me, not cosine. Cosecant. So those are our three main trig functions, and which ones you can take the reciprocal of to find as well. So they're going to give us some information in these problems, and they're going to want us to solve the entire triangle, meaning find all the missing angles and sides. So let's take a look at an example, and this is just going to be kind of what I would say is called tinkering with a problem until we kind of get what we need. So let's take a look at this first one. In this first one, they give us side C and angle A, and they do draw out a right triangle for us so that we know what they're referring to with the A, B, and C. So we've got A, B, and C for our angles, and angle C is already given, it's a right angle. And then they tell us that side C, which is always opposite the 90-degree angle, is 89.6 centimeters. So let's go ahead and fill that in, 89.6 centimeters. And they also tell us that angle A is, angle A is 47.8 degrees. So this angle right here is 47.8 degrees. Now, what's really nice is because we have 2 out of the 3 angles, we can find the third, because remember, all the angles in a triangle need to add up to 180. So if we go ahead and we have 2 out of 3, well, we do know that we already have that C is 90. So I can take out the 90 I already used. And I can take out the angle A. We already have the 47.8. And what's ever left over with that should be my angle for angle B. So whatever's left over should be angle B here. So let's go ahead and subtract so we can get angle B. And we end up with 42.2 degrees for our angle B. So that's part of our answer here for solving this right triangle. Is one of the missing angles was angle B, and we've got it now. Now we've got one side, we've got the hypotenuse, and we're missing sides A and B. Those two we need to find now. So it doesn't actually matter which one we try to find first, next, but let's try and find side A first. So how are we going to find side A? Well, we need to use one of the trig functions, one of the angles, and one of the sides. So how are we going to do that? Well, I need to pick one of the angles. I'm going to use angle A here and use it to find side A, but I need to use a side I already have, so we have to use the hypotenuse. So we need to talk about what sides I have. Well, if I'm talking about using angle A and side A, well, side A is opposite of angle A, And we know that side C is always the hypotenuse. So what trig function has opposite and hypotenuse? Well, that's SOHCAHTOA. That's so in the SOHCAHTOA, which means I'm going to be using sine. So I'm going to be using that sine of our angle, which was 47.8, our angle A. Remember, is opposite. Well, the opposite side to this is side A. We don't know what that is. We'll find that in a second. Over hypotenuse, which we just said the hypotenuse on this one was 89.6. So the goal is going to be solve this equation for A. So to get A by itself, what we need to get rid of is the 89.6 on the bottom. So we're going to multiply both sides by the number 89.6. And what happens when we multiply both sides by an 89.6 is it cancels out on this side, on the right-hand side, leaving us with A by itself. And on the other side, I've got to figure out whatever sine of 47.8 degrees is and multiply that by the 89.6. Make sure that our angle is in degrees, so make sure that your calculator is also in degree mode, but let's see what we end up with for our value for A. So we end up getting a 66.4, and what I will say is I did not round the value for sine of 47.8. I just took whatever it was and multiplied it by the 89.6. Be careful, if you round too early, it may throw off your answers quite a bit, which when I give partial credit on tests is not a big deal because I'll look at your work, but my math lab, that could throw you off by a couple decimal places and it may just mark it wrong. So you'd have to wait for me to go back and give partial credit. It just depends. Sometimes it can make quite a bit of a difference. So side A is 66.4. Don't forget there should be units. This is a word type problem. Not quite, but the other side was in centimeters. So this side will also be in centimeters. So side A is 66.4 centimeters. Okay. So the only side we're now missing is side B, and we could do it the same way using one of the 6 trig functions, or what we could do is we've got instead of 2 sides, instead of having all 3 sides, we now have 2 out of 3. We now have the 66.4. Once you have 2 out of 3, though, you can use your Pythagorean theorem because we have a right triangle, but it's up to you. You can use your trig functions again, or you can use your Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. We just found out that side A is 66.4, so you'd be plugging in a 66.4 for your A here, which notice is squared, plus your B squared equals your C squared. Well, your C was your hypotenuse from the picture, which is 89.6, which is again squared. So again, be careful about rounding here. If you round too early, this could throw off your whole answer. So let's calculator to figure out what's going on here. So let's start out by doing our exponents first, because order of operations says exponents first. Squaring the 66.4 gets you 4,408 and 96 as our decimal. And we have not looked at B squared yet, so let's leave that alone. And equals, now let's figure out what 89.6 squared is. And this one gives us 8028.16 for squaring our 89.6 squared. So the next step to solving this equation would be subtracting your 4,408 and 96 from both sides. And be careful, this does not get us B, it still only gets us B squared. But that does get us a 3619.2. And to actually get B, not B squared, we'd have to take the square root of both sides of the equation. That will get rid of the squared with the square root, leaving us with just the B that was underneath. So the question then becomes, what is the square root of 3619.2? and you get a value of 60.2. And again, remember this is a side, so that's in centimeters like the other two sides. But that is how we've solved our entire right triangle, because now we have all three angles and all three sides figured out. That's what it means to solve a right triangle. Let's take a look at another problem. In this next problem, let's see what we've got. We've got a right triangle, same picture again. We've got angle C as always, our 90 degrees.